Imagine a single book that holds the entire blueprint for running a nation. I mean, everything. How to train a king, manage a massive economy, handle diplomacy, run a spy network, and even the secret arts of war. Well, that book is real. It's called the Arthashastra, and its author is one of history's most brilliant and mysterious figures, Chanakya. Today, we're going to crack open this ancient blueprint for power and see what it's all about.
But hang on. Before we unpack the blueprint, we have to tackle the biggest mystery of all. Did Chanakya, the legendary kingmaker who built an empire, even exist? Or is he a myth, a sort of personification of political genius? This question has baffled historians for ages, and it's the perfect place for us to start.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll dive right into that mystery. Was Chanakya a man or a myth? Then, we'll get into his masterpiece, the Arthashastra itself. We'll look at the duties of a king, the machinery of an empire, and, yeah, the ruthless arts of power. And finally, we'll ask what makes this ancient guide still feel so relevant today.
All right, let's start with the man at the center of it all, the figure who, as legend has it, built an entire empire from the shadows. So the traditional story goes like this. Chanakya was this brilliant strategist who found a young Chandragupta Maurya and basically mentored him, guiding him to overthrow an entire dynasty and establish the massive Mauryan Empire way back in the 4th century BCE. You'll hear him called by a few names. Kautilya is one, Vishnugupta is another. But for all the legends, his entire legacy, his whole story, is really funneled through this one incredible text.
And this is where the debate gets really interesting. On the one hand, you have the skeptics. They point out, correctly, that there's no hard proof from that time, no inscriptions, no coins, that says Chanakya was here. They argue the Arthashastra could be a compilation, the work of a whole school of thinkers over time. But then the counterargument is pretty compelling. I mean, think about Socrates. He's one of the most famous thinkers ever, but he didn't write a single thing down. We only know him through others. And when you read the Arthashastra, the vision is so cohesive, so deep, it really feels like the product of one singular, brilliant mind.
You know, whether it was written by one man or a whole committee, the work itself is an absolute monument. So let's shift our focus from the author to the masterpiece itself. What exactly is the Arthashastra?
Well, the name itself tells you a whole lot. Artha basically means wealth, material well-being, or prosperity, and Shastra means a science or a treatise. So you put them together, and the Arthashastra is literally the science of material gain, or more broadly, the science of politics and economics. It falls into a category of texts known as Niti Shastra, which are all about practical policy and how to run things.
And this is what makes it so unique compared to other ancient Indian texts you might have heard of. The Dharma Shastras, for example, are all about dharma. That's righteousness, moral duty, and religious law. They describe the ideal way society should be. But the Arthashastra, it's grounded in Artha. It's not about some perfect moral world. It's a pragmatic, sometimes ruthless guide for how a king must act in the real world to keep the state stable, powerful, and wealthy.
Now, this is a super important point. We shouldn't read the Arthashastra like it's a history book describing exactly how the Mauryan Empire worked. The author himself says he looked at everything that came before to create these principles. Think of it more like a theoretical manual, a universal blueprint designed for any king, ruling any kingdom at any time.
And the scope of this thing is just breathtaking. It's split into 15 books that cover, and I mean this literally, everything. Book I is all about the personal discipline a king needs. Then you jump to Book 2, and it lays out the entire civil administration. Book 7 is a masterclass in foreign policy. It even gets into stuff like using secret occult practices against your enemies in Book 14. This isn't just a book, it's a complete operating system for an entire kingdom.
So where does this giant blueprint even begin? Well, it starts right at the heart of the state, with the king himself. What kind of ruler did Chanakya think was ideal? For Chanakya, all power starts with self-control. It's a simple but powerful idea. Before a king can even think about conquering other kingdoms, he has to conquer himself. That means mastering what the text calls the 6 enemies. Now, some are obvious, right? Lust, anger, greed, makes sense. But it also includes vanity, haughtiness, and get this, even overjoy. Why? Because a king who's celebrating too much gets careless. The central idea is that an undisciplined king is the single biggest threat to his own kingdom.
This might just be the most famous line in the entire Arthashastra, and it really gets to the ethical heart of the whole thing. It's such a profound statement. A king isn't supposed to rule for his own pleasure or his own glory. His personal happiness is directly tied, completely linked to the happiness and welfare of his people.
His interests and the state's interests are one and the same.
And that welfare doesn't just happen on its own. The text is very clear. Prosperity comes from action. A lazy king is the root of all problems, so the king must be constantly active, always vigilant, always engaged in running the state. Activity is the engine that drives the whole kingdom forward.
Okay, so you have a disciplined, active king at the center. How do you actually run the empire? Well, Chanakya lays out an incredibly detailed structure for the machinery of state.
Chanakya basically sees the state as a living organism with 7 vital parts, or prakritis. You've got the king, he's the head. The ministers, they're the eyes. The people in the land, those are the legs. The forts are the arms. The treasury is the mouth. The army is the mind. And finally, your allies are the ears. The point is, for a state to be strong and healthy, every single one of these 7 parts has to be in good shape.
And he puts a huge emphasis on those ministers, the amatya. He goes on and on about how to pick them, warning the king to never, ever surround himself with yes-men or flatterers. He literally says a treacherous minister is more dangerous than an enemy soldier at your gates. Appointments have to be a pure meritocracy, based only on things like wisdom, loyalty, and bravery.
The day-to-day administration he describes is just mind-bogglingly detailed. He calls for a whole bureaucracy of superintendents for dozens of departments, everything from farming and trade to liquor and even slaughterhouses. He lists 40 different ways an official can embezzle money and then lays out strict auditing procedures to catch them. And to keep everyone in line, a massive network of spies that monitors not just the citizens, but the officials themselves. It's a tightly controlled system. All right, this brings us to the most famous and maybe the most infamous part of the Arthashastra, its unsentimental, pragmatic guide to wielding power on the world stage. Chanakya's foreign policy, known as the Shadguniyam, is a masterclass in pure strategy. It's not just war or peace, it's a whole toolbox. A king needs to know when to make a treaty, when to stay neutral and just watch his enemies fight each other, when to prepare for war, when to find a powerful ally, and even how to use a dual policy. Make peace with one guy while you're at war with another. The goal is always the same: make your own position stronger.
And the number one tool for making all this happen: intelligence. Spies. The spy network described in this book is just incredible. We're talking about spies disguised as monks, merchants, students, you name it. And their job isn't just to listen. They are active agents sent to spread misinformation, create arguments between your enemies, and basically weaken a rival kingdom from the inside out so that maybe you don't even have to go to war.
So, when you put it all together, what is the lasting impact of this incredible and, let's be honest, pretty ruthless text?
Okay, let's boil it all down. What are the big ideas you should take away? First, this book is a complete A to Z manual on power. Second, it's this fascinating balancing act between a deep ethical duty to your own people and total pragmatism toward your enemies. Third, a strong economy is the foundation of everything. Artha comes first. Fourth, knowledge, strategy, and intelligence are way more powerful than just brute force. And finally, it all comes back to the ruler, who has to be disciplined, active, and always vigilant.
We started this by asking if Chanakya was a real person. But maybe, after seeing just how deep and brilliant the Arthashastra is, that isn't the most important question. Maybe the sheer genius of the blueprint itself, this guide to a kingdom that has fascinated people for thousands of years, is the only proof that really matters.